The war room fell silent when Admiral Chun walked in. Every officer stood at attention. Their faces showed the weight of recent events. 3 days ago, everything changed. 3 of their own had betrayed humanity. They had taken every battle plan, every strategy, and every secret to the enemy. The Varathian Empire now knew everything about the human fleet. Admiral Chun looked at the holographic display. It showed the enemy fleet moving toward Earth. 2,000 warships. Each one was larger than anything humans had ever built. The Varathians were confident. They believed they knew exactly what humanity would do. They were wrong. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Chun said quietly, "the traitors have done their damage." Commander Walsh, Lieutenant Torres, and Captain Brennan gave the Varathians everything they asked for. Every ship position, every weapon system, every tactical approach we planned. She paused and looked around the room. But they only gave what they knew. And none of them knew about Protocol Omega. The officers exchanged confused glances. Protocol Omega was not in any official record. It existed only in the minds of 12 people. Admiral Chun was one of them. The protocol was created 30 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the Varathian Empire. The admirals of that time understood something important. Humans were trusting creatures. Too trusting. And trust could be exploited. Commander Hayes raised his hand. "Admiral, what exactly is Protocol Omega?" Admiral Chun smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was steel behind it. "Protocol Omega is the backup plan for everything. Every strategy we create has a shadow version. Every weapon system has a hidden modification. Every ship position has an alternate arrangement. The Defectors gave the Varathians our public plans. They could not give what they never knew existed. Deep in space, the Varathian fleet moved with absolute confidence. High Commander Zortek stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was tall, with gray skin and 4 eyes that glowed with satisfaction. In his hands, he held data pads containing every human secret. He had studied them for hours. The humans were predictable. They would position their fleet near the moon. They would use their new quantum torpedoes in the first wave. They would try to protect their civilian evacuation ships at all costs. "These creatures are fools," Zordik announced to his officers. They trusted their own people with sensitive information. "Now we know everything. We will crush them without effort." His second-in-command, a female Varathian named Kira Vilal, nodded in agreement. The human defectors were most cooperative. They wanted safety and wealth. We gave them promises. They gave us victory. Zordik laughed. The sound was harsh and cold. "Position our fleet according to human weakness. They will put their strongest ships on the left flank. We will overwhelm them there first. Their quantum torpedoes have a charging time of 40 seconds. We will fire during their reload cycle. Their evacuation ships will flee toward Mars. We have already sent interceptors to cut them off." Everything seemed perfect. The Varathians had prepared for every possibility. Or so they believed. Back on Earth, Admiral Chun was giving her final briefings. The officers listened carefully. What they heard surprised them. Their positions were different from all previous plans. Their weapons had been modified in secret. Even the ships themselves had hidden capabilities. "The enemy expects our fleet near the moon," Chun explained. "We will not be there. The enemy expects quantum torpedoes with 40-second reload times. Our engineers have reduced that to 12 seconds using technology we kept classified even from our own people. The enemy expects our civilians to run toward Mars. There are no civilians going to Mars. The evacuation ships are actually armed troop carriers with cloaking technology." Lieutenant Park, a young tactical officer, leaned forward. "Admiral, how do we keep all this secret?" "Our systems are open. Our records are shared among allied officers." Chun nodded. "That is exactly why Protocol Omega exists. We learned long ago that electronic records can be stolen. Digital secrets can be copied. But knowledge kept only in human minds cannot be hacked. The 12 of us who know Protocol Omega never wrote anything down. We never spoke of it near recording devices. We trained our crews in secret facilities that officially do not exist. The genius of Protocol Omega was its simplicity. Humans had learned from their history. They studied how ancient generals had used deception. They remembered how spies had been fed false information in old wars. They applied these lessons to space warfare. Every public plan was real enough to be believed. But every public plan had a hidden twin that was better. The Varathian fleet arrived at the designated coordinates. They expected to find the human defense fleet waiting near the moon. Instead, they found empty space. Zordek's 4 eyes widened in confusion. He checked his data pads again. The human defectors had been certain. The fleet would be here. Scan the entire system, Zordek ordered. Find them. The scans took several minutes. When the results came back, Zordek felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. The human fleet was not near the moon. It was behind the Varathian formation. Somehow, they had moved without being detected. Somehow, they had anticipated this exact moment. Admiral Chun watched from her flagship as the trap closed. The Varathians had walked right into it. Their formation was designed to attack a fleet that was never there. Now they were surrounded. Their backs were exposed. Their flanks were vulnerable. All ships, Chun commanded. Execute Protocol Omega. Phase 1. The human fleet opened fire. But these were not the weapons the Varathians expected. The quantum torpedoes launched in waves that seemed impossible. Reload times were supposed to be 40 seconds. The humans were firing every 12 seconds. The Varathian shields, calibrated to handle the expected rate of fire, began to fail. Zordek screamed orders at his crew. Return fire. Target their weapon systems. But the human ships moved in patterns the Varathians had never seen. The battle plans provided by the Defectors showed predictable formations. These movements were chaotic and brilliant. Every time the Varathians targeted a ship, it slipped away. Every time they thought they had an advantage, the humans countered perfectly. On the human flagship, Commander Hayes watched the battle unfold. Admiral, the enemy is adapting. They are learning our new patterns. Chun nodded calmly. Execute Phase 2. Phase 2 was even more devastating. The ships that the Varathians believed were evacuation vessels suddenly decloaked directly in their midst. These were not helpless civilian transports. They were heavily armed assault carriers. Thousands of human fighters launched from their bays. The Varathians were now fighting on all sides. Kiravel rushed to Zortek's side. Aye, Commander, we must retreat. This is not what we prepared for. The human defectors lied to us. Zordek shook his head. They did not lie. They told us everything they knew. But they did not know the truth themselves. For the first time, Zordek understood the depth of human cunning. They had anticipated betrayal. They had planned for treachery. They had built a system that turned their own weakness into a weapon. The battle raged for 3 hours. By the end, half of the Varathian fleet was destroyed. The rest were in full retreat. Admiral Chun watched them flee toward the edge of the solar system. She felt no joy. War was never joyful. But she felt satisfaction. Humanity had survived another test. In the aftermath, questions needed answers. How had the defectors been identified? How had Protocol Omega remained secret for 30 years? Admiral Chun explained some of it to her officers. The defectors had been suspected for months. They were allowed to access the public plans. They were kept away from anything truly sensitive. When they finally ran to the enemy, they carried exactly what humanity wanted them to carry: false confidence. The war would continue. The Varathian Empire was vast and powerful, but they had learned an important lesson. Humans were not the simple creatures they appeared to be. Humans had been fighting among themselves for thousands of years. They had developed skills of deception that older species had never needed. Trust could be a weapon, Betrayal could be turned against the betrayers. Admiral Chun retired to her quarters after the battle. She sat in the darkness and thought about the future. 12 people knew Protocol Omega. Now there would need to be 12 more. New plans would need new shadows. New strategies would need hidden twins. Humanity would always have traitors. That was simply part of their nature. But humanity would also always have those who planned for treachery. The 3 defectors were found 1 week later. The Varathians had executed them when their information proved worthless. Admiral Chun read the report without emotion. They had chosen their path. They had paid the price. But their betrayal had taught the Varathians nothing except that humans could not be trusted. And that distrust would make the next battle even harder for the enemy. Years later, historians would study this battle. They would call it the turning point of the war. They would praise Admiral Chun for her brilliance. But Chun always credited the admirals who came before her. They were the ones who understood the truth about humanity. Humans were capable of great loyalty. They were also capable of great betrayal. The wise leader planned for both. The Varathian Empire eventually sued for peace. They had won many battles after that first defeat, but they never again felt confident about their intelligence. Every piece of information could be false. Every defector could be carrying lies. The psychological damage was worse than any weapon. On the day the peace treaty was signed, Admiral Chun stood beside the Varathian representatives. Zortak was among them. He had survived the war. He looked at Chun with his 4 eyes and asked a question that had bothered him for years. How many protocols do you have? How many backup plans exist? Chun smiled and said nothing. That was the most human answer she could give. Let them wonder. Let them doubt. Let them fear the things they did not know. Uncertainty was the greatest weapon humanity possessed. The stars continued to shine over Earth. Ships moved through space carrying trade and travelers. But somewhere, in hidden facilities that officially did not exist, new plans were being made. New shadows were being created. Humanity had learned its lesson long ago. Trust was precious. Trust was necessary. But trust should never be blind. The defectors had revealed everything they knew. But knowledge was not the same as truth. And truth, in the hands of humanity, was the most dangerous weapon of all.